The wind came sharp off the river that curled around the town of Feldrin's Hollow. In spring, it brought mist that hung low over the fields like breath from a sleeping giant. In autumn, the trees along the hills turned gold and red, their leaves whispering as if they remembered things no one dared speak. Feldrin's Hollow was the kind of place where people kept their heads down, their voices low, and their fences high. Most folks had never left the valley. They didn't trust outsiders, and they didn't trust Tarran. Tarran wasn't hard to spot. Broad shoulders, skin like slate iron, heavy brow, and tusks peeking from his lower lip. The children called him half-ogre before they knew what that meant. The adults didn't correct them. Tarran lived in the old mill house with Brenna, the herb wife who raised him after his mother died giving birth. No one ever spoke of the father. No one asked. Brenna said his name meant stone rooted in water. Tarran thought it sounded like someone trying to stand still while the river kept pulling. That made sense to him. He grew up near the edge of things, sat in the back of the schoolhouse if he was allowed in at all, carried buckets for the blacksmith when his own arms were strong enough, hauled hay bales for farmers who never met his eye. Some gave him scraps of work, others called him a curse. Tarran heard it all, the whispers, the fear, the way people crossed the road when he walked by, even after he started pulling his hood low and keeping his head down. But Brenna never bent to any of it. She taught him about roots and stars and where the wind carried seed. She showed him how to crush leaf and bark into poultices, how to clean a wound with boiled moss, how to read the sky before a storm. Her voice was steady, soft like coals beneath ash. She never lied to him. "You weren't born to be one of them," she said, "but you weren't born to be less." Tarran spent his childhood chasing meaning in silence. He helped when no one asked. He kept his fists down when boys tried to provoke him. He found lost goats and returned them without asking for coin. He learned every path in the forest and never took the same one twice. No one thanked him, but they started locking their doors a little later, leaving out water buckets in dry season where he could reach them. It wasn't friendship, but it wasn't hatred either. That was enough. One winter, the old bridge washed out. A trader's wagon tumbled into the river, wheels shattered, the driver pinned beneath it. People stood at the bank shouting, waving ropes. Tarran didn't speak. He walked into the river, shoulders braced against the current, and lifted the broken axle long enough for others to pull the man free. Then he vanished into the woods before anyone could talk to him. After that, they called him Tarran the Quiet. Not a compliment, not an insult, something in between. But it was the first time his name stood alone, not followed by orc blood or half-breed. That was something. Then came the girl. She arrived one summer evening, cloak torn, face streaked with ash, said her name was Lysa, said she was looking for the old herb wife, said monsters had taken her village. No one wanted to believe it. No one wanted to hear more. But Brenna let her in, and Tarran listened. Lysa spoke of creatures made of bone and fog, said they came from the woods near the Pale Crag Hills, driven by no one, feeding on fear and memory. No one believed her. People muttered about fever dreams and bad mushrooms. But Tarran noticed things. The way the birds flew in strange patterns, how the wolves stopped howling at night, the way the air felt different. Brenna didn't speak for days. Then, one morning, she handed Tarran a small pouch of dried leaves and a curved knife. "Go with her," she said. "Whatever's coming, it's old. It remembers." So Tarran and Lisa left the hollow at dawn, walking into woods older than maps. No one stopped them. No one asked where they were going. The first night they slept under a moss-covered ridge. The second night something moved through the trees without sound. On the third night they saw the ruins. Black stones, scorched by something hotter than fire. Symbols carved into the cliffs that twisted if you looked too long. Lisa said it was once a watchtower. Tarran said nothing, but he felt something stir behind his ribs. Something ancient, something waiting. The wind shifted. They weren't alone. Something watched them from the dark. And Tarran, the half-orc who had spent his life being feared, now felt fear himself, not for his own safety, but for what lay ahead. Because this wasn't a story about being accepted by a village. This was about something older than hate, and it had begun to wake. Tarran grew up outside the walls of trust, but now the world beyond those walls was breaking, and he was the only one who could hold the pieces. True strength comes from knowing what the world won't give you and choosing to protect it anyway. The air in the ruins didn't move. No bird song, no wind, not even the sound of their own footsteps on the black stone path echoed right. Tarran felt the wrongness first in his teeth, like pressure before a storm. Lisa stopped beside him, her hand drifting to the hilt of the small dagger Brenna had given her. They had followed the river east for 3 days, past the fallen birch grove, through marsh and thorn and into the low hills. The map they'd made from scraps and stories was useless now. Trees grew too close together. Stones shifted when no one touched them. And every night something cried in the woods with a voice that sounded almost human. They didn't speak much. Tarran had never been talkative, and Lisa had too much to remember. Her village hadn't fallen to swords or fire. It had simply faded. People forgot how to speak. Homes crumbled overnight. The sky changed color. Then the things came, shapes that slipped through walls and drank sound. Lisa said she woke up with her sister's name gone from her mind. That was when she ran. Tarran didn't ask questions. He believed her. Now, standing in the hollow of a ruined tower that looked burned from within, they knew 2 things. 1. Something had happened here long before either of them was born. 2. It wasn't over. He brushed his hand against the tower's base. The stone felt soft, like old bone. Symbols lined the wall, shapes that shifted if he stared too long. Some looked like eyes, others like chains. Lisa knelt beside a half-buried pillar. Her fingers brushed the edge of an old seal, metal, cracked, fused into the stone like it had melted there. A circle of teeth. Her breath caught. I've seen this before. Tarran didn't move. Where? On a door in the woods, near where the disappearances started. He looked up the tower. Broken walls. No roof. Still, it pressed against the sky like it didn't know it had fallen. Someone put this here, he said, to keep something in. They made camp under the roots of a split cedar half a mile from the tower. Tarran lit no fire. The smoke would draw attention. Whatever watched them, it didn't need eyes. That night, Tarran dreamed. Not of fire or beasts or blood. He dreamed of a man with no face sitting in the chair by Brenna's hearth. The man held a cup in one hand, a knife in the other. He spoke, but the words had no sound. And every time Tarran tried to step closer, his feet sank into the floor like mud. When he woke, the trees were whispering. Lisa was gone. Tarran didn't panic. He crouched low, pressed his palm to the earth, and listened. The ground was still soft from last night's rain. Her boots hadn't left tracks, but the moss had shifted where she passed. He followed the trail through underbrush and between tilted stones until the trees thinned. He found her standing at the edge of a shallow glade. She was staring into a pit in the center, round, deep, and impossibly dark. "Tarran," she said without turning. "There's something buried here, and it's waking up." He stepped beside her. The pit was wide enough to swallow a cart. Scorch marks circled the edges as if someone had tried to seal it long ago. Now it was cracked open like a broken jar. The air pouring out wasn't cold in a normal way. It didn't chill skin, it pressed into the mind, made old thoughts slip out of reach. Tarran felt it like pressure behind his eyes. He stepped back. Who opened it? Lisa looked up at him. Her face was pale. "I think we did, when we walked near the tower." They didn't say anything after that. They turned west and started back toward the hollow, but they weren't alone. At first, it felt like a shadow in the trees. Then it pressed in closer. It wasn't something they saw. It was something they felt, heavy, unseen. Like being watched by something that didn't need eyes. Tarran noticed it most at night. When they stopped to rest, Lisa's hands shook while lighting the fire. She wouldn't eat. He passed her a handful of bitter roots, hoping it would help her steady herself. She didn't take them. By the 5th day, the land began to change. The trees looked sick. Their bark peeled in long strips. Leaves fell even though it was still summer. The wind didn't move right. The river they'd followed since the edge of the hills now crawled like syrup. Tarran crouched beside it and touched the water. "Too warm," he said. "It's spreading underground." Lisa kept her eyes on the tree line. "It's moving toward places where people remember it. That's how it grows." When they reached the hollow, something was wrong. The town looked the same. Smoke still curled from the chimneys. Carts sat along the roads, tools leaned against doorways, but no one came out to greet them. Tarran walked down the main path. Lisa stayed close. People stood in doorways staring blankly ahead. Their faces were slack, eyes vacant. No movement, no sound. Tarran stopped. "They're still breathing," he said, "but they're not here." Lisa stepped up to a boy sitting on a porch and waved her hand in front of his face. He didn't blink. "It's feeding on them," she said, "not their bodies, their minds, their memories." Tarran's stomach tightened. They ran to Brenna's house. The door creaked open. She was sitting in her chair, hands wrapped around a cup of tea. The fire in the hearth was cold. The cup steamed anyway. She looked up at them, but her eyes didn't recognize Tarran. She opened her mouth like she meant to speak, but nothing came out. Then her lips moved, and a single word slipped out. One Tarran didn't know, but it scraped against the air like iron on stone. She reached into her shawl and pulled out a folded piece of bark. Inside, 2 words. "Name it." Then her hands went still. Tarran caught her before she fell. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. Lisa touched his arm. "Whatever was down there, it's here now. If we don't stop it, it'll keep spreading, town to town, until no one remembers anything at all." Tarran stood and looked around at the hollow, his home, now hollow in truth. He nodded. "Then we stop it." And this time he wasn't waiting for someone else to act. The hollow didn't wake. Not the next morning, not the next 3. The villagers moved like ghosts, tending gardens, drawing water, sweeping steps, without memory, without speech. Tarran watched them from Brenna's porch. He tried calling names. No one answered. Even Brenna's dog followed him without wagging its tail. "Whatever this is," he said to Lisa, "it's inside them now." She stood near the gate with arms folded, watching the fog settle between the trees. It doesn't need to kill. It empties, leaves the shell behind. Tarran nodded. How do we fight something we can't see? Lysa took a long time to answer. We need to remember what it is. That afternoon they returned to the glade. The pit was deeper, wider, the stones around it had cracked. Something had clawed upward from the depths, not with hands or teeth, but with thought. Lysa knelt near the edge, pressing both palms to the ground, her lips moved. Tarran listened, but the words weren't hers. They came in a rhythm older than speech. The wind turned bitter. After a moment, she spoke clearly again. It's called the Murmuring Root, old magic. Born before cities, before language, it was sealed when the first stone towers were raised, kept asleep beneath the hills so people could build without forgetting who they were. Tarran crouched beside her. Why did it wake up now? Because we stepped too close, and because people have forgotten how to listen. It feeds on silence, on memory left untended. He didn't understand every word, but he understood the meaning. The more people forgot what mattered, names, stories, places, the stronger the root grew. It wasn't following them anymore. It had arrived. That night, they made a fire just outside the hollow. Tarran drew lines in the dirt, old boundary marks his grandfather once taught him. Lysa crushed herbs between stones. Smoke curled upward, bitter and sharp. They weren't preparing a battle, they were preparing a story. Magic doesn't move like fire or steel, she said. It moves like memory. It needs meaning. They built a circle of wood and stones. Tarran carved the names of every person he remembered into the bark. Brenna, Halwyn, Myra, the Baker twins. Lysa did the same. By dawn, they had covered the entire circle with names, faces, scraps of story. Nothing fancy, just enough to anchor them. Then they walked back to the glade. The pit had changed again. Now it pulsed. A slow rhythm like breath or tide. Cold mist hovered above the opening. When Tarran stepped close, it felt like his thoughts were being pulled from his head, one by one. Lysa gripped his arm. Don't speak. Don't think anything you're not willing to lose. She stepped into the mist. He followed. Inside, there was no up or down, no ground, no sky, just roots, thick, tangled, black as coal. They stretched in all directions, curling around old bones, shattered tools, stone rings too smooth for any known chisel. Voices echoed through the dark. Some were familiar. His grandfather's, Brenna's, a child's laugh he hadn't heard since he was small. Others were not. They heard Lysa's name spoken in 10 different tones, some gentle, some cruel. One voice begged her to stay. Another accused her of being the reason the seal broke. Tarran watched her falter, but she kept walking. The root tested them with memory. It offered old comforts, broken promises, guilt twisted into vines. Tarran saw the faces of villagers who'd once spat at his feet, now calling him friend. He saw his mother's shadow, her back turned, walking into the trees. He saw himself walking after her, failing to call out. He clenched his fists. "You don't own that," he said. The root didn't answer. It didn't need to. It was memory without meaning, thought without weight. It wanted to unmake them. At the center of the roots, they found the heart, not a heart like a creature's, a knot of darkness pulsing slow. Around it, tangled in the roots, were fragments, pages, carvings, pieces of broken masks, worn medallions, rusted swords, things people had forgotten. Lysa stepped forward. She pulled a strip of cloth from her pocket, the one her mother had given her when they left the tower. She tied it to the root and spoke one word. Her true name. The mist shuddered. Tarran stepped beside her. He removed a small wooden carving from his belt, an old toy sword carved by Thomas the winter before he died. He pressed it into the root. "I remember who I am," he said. "You don't get to rewrite it." The root writhed. Mist split apart. The darkness pulsed faster now, unsettled. They felt the weight begin to lift. The root was not being killed. It was being named, remembered. It couldn't feed on people who refused to forget. As the glade snapped back into shape, the pit closed, not sealed by magic, but sealed by choice. Lisa knelt on the ground, breathing hard. Tarran helped her up. "It's not gone," she said. "No," Tarran replied, "but it's buried again, and this time we'll remember where." They walked back to the hollow. At first, nothing changed. The villagers still moved slow, their eyes blank. Then Halwyn blinked, looked around, took a step. The baker's twins called to each other. Brenna stood in her doorway and said Tarran's name. Like fog lifting, the hollow woke. One by one, people came back to themselves, faces lit with recognition. Parents called to children, dogs barked, windows opened, life resumed, slow, cautious, but alive. No one knew exactly what had happened, but they knew who had brought them back. Tarran didn't explain. He didn't need to. That night, a new carving was added to the town square, not a statue. A circle of wood bound with old names pressed into the center with nails and ash. A reminder. When people asked what it was for, Brenna answered simply, "So we don't forget." Tarran stayed in the hollow. He didn't wander, didn't disappear into the forest like his mother had. He built a small home near the edge of town where the roots used to grow. Lisa stayed nearby. They shared chores, stories, long silences. Neither tried to be anything they weren't. People visited them for tea, for help, for stories, and Tarran always welcomed them. Because now when people asked who he was, he had an answer that didn't need to explain his blood or his past. He was the one who remembered. Some threats don't strike, they wait for silence. Tarran taught us that remembering is its own kind of strength. Subscribe to hear more stories.